Hello dear students, this is Vishal sir from Ikra High School. Today we'll continue chapter 13 for standard 9th NCERT syllabus. Part 2, Infectious Disease. Infectious Agents. We have seen that the entire diversity seen in the living world can be classified into a few groups. This classification is based on common characteristics between different organisms. Organisms that can cause disease are found in a wide range of such category of classification. Some of them are virus, some are bacteria, some are fungi, and some are single cell animals or protozoa. Some diseases are also caused by multicellular organisms such as worms. Here on this page you can see the pictures of different viruses and different microscope organisms given which are pathogenic. SARS virus was considered as the most dangerous virus in the world. COVID-19 is also one of the part of SARS. Then we have Leishmania, a protozoa organism that calls Kala-Azar, Staphylococcus, the bacteria which cause acne, roundworm, Ascaris, lumbricoids from the small intestine, Trypanosoma, protozoa organism responsible for sleeping sickness. So students, those were the microscope organisms which cause many harmful diseases. Common examples of disease caused by virus are common cold, influenza, dengue fever and AIDS. Disease like typhoid, fever, cholera, tuberculosis and anthrax are caused by bacteria. Many common skin infections are caused by different kinds of fungus. Protozoa microbes cause many familiar diseases such as malaria and Kala-Azar. All of us have come across an intestinal worm infection as well as disease like elephantiasis caused by different species of the worm. Why is it important that we think of this category of infectious agents? The answer is that these categories are important factor in deciding what kind of treatment to use. Members of each one of these group, virus, bacteria and so on, have many biological characteristics in common. All virus, for example, live inside the host cells where bacteria very rarely do. So, according to the given syllabus, viruses lives inside the host whereas bacteria don't. Virus, bacteria and fungi multiply very quickly while worms multiply very slowly. Taxonomically, all bacteria are closely related to each other than to virus and vice versa. This means that many important life processes are similar in bacteria group but are not shared with virus groups. As a result, drug, that is the medicine that blocks one of this life process in one member of the group is likely to be effective against many other members of the group. But the same drug will not work against a microbe belonging to a different group. This means that a medicine that works for viruses won't work for bacteria, and it will be same for bacteria. If a medicine works to cure a bacterial infection, that won't cure virus infection. An example, let us take antibiotics. They commonly block biochemical pathway important for bacteria. So what is the use of antibiotics? They actually block the path of bacteria to the cell. Many bacteria, for example, make a cell wall to protect themselves. The antibiotic penicillin blocks the bacterial process that builds the cell wall. As a result, the growing bacteria becomes unable to make cell wall and die easily. So here, in this case, the bacteria dies on its own if it doesn't get the comfortable zone, that it doesn't get to the cell. If it gets to the cell, it will make a cell wall. But here, the antibiotic does not let the bacteria reach to the cell. That's why it dies. Human cell don't make cell wall anyway. So penicillin cannot have such an effect on us. Penicillin will have this effect on any bacteria that use such process for making cell walls. Similarly, many antibiotics work against many species of bacteria rather than simply working against one. But viruses do not use this pathway at all, and that is the reason why antibiotics do not work against viral infections. If we have a common cold, taking antibiotic does not reduce the severity or the duration of the disease. However, if we also get a bacterial infection along with the viral cold, taking antibiotic will help. Even then, the antibiotic will work only against the bacterial part of the infection, not the viral infection. Means of spread. How do infectious disease spread? Many microbial agents can commonly move from an infected person to someone else in a variety of ways. In other words, they can be communicated and so are called communicable disease. Such disease causing microbe can spread through air. This occurs through the little droplet thrown out by an infected person who sneezes or coughs. Someone standing close by can breathe in these droplets and the microbes get a chance to start new infection. Examples of such disease spread through air are common cold, pneumonia and tuberculosis. We all have had the experience of sitting near some suffering from a cold and catching it ourselves. Obviously, the more crowded our living conditions are, the more likely it is that such airborne disease will spread. So dear students, here you can see how the disease spreads from one person to another. The disease that spreads from one person to another are called communicable disease. They spread normally through air. Some common examples of such disease are common cold, pneumonia and tuberculosis. The more crowded our living conditions are, the more likely it is that such airborne disease will spread. Disease can also be spread through water. This is the another part of communication. This occurs if the excreta from someone suffering from an infection gut disease such as cholera get mixed with the drinking water used by people nearby. The cholera causing microbes will enter a healthy person through the water they drink and cause disease in them. So, drinking polluted water is also a cause of communicable disease. Such diseases are much more likely to spread in the absence of safe supplies of drinking water. That means if our organizations don't work for the purification of water till it reaches to us, then it is likely that we can get infected through such disease. The sexual act is one of the closest physical contact two people can have with each other. Not surprisingly, there are microbial infections such as syphilis or AIDS that are transmitted by sexual contact. So two diseases spread through sexual contact. It is syphilis and AIDS from one partner to other. However, sexually transmitted disease or short form STD are not spread by casual physical contact. So if you shake hands, if you just touch each other, that does not cause STD. Casual physical contact include handshake or hug or sports like wrestling or by any of the other way in which we touch each other socially. Other than the sexual contact, the virus called AIDS can also spread through blood-to-blood contact with infected person or from an infected mother to the baby during pregnancy or through the breastfeeding. So this HIV, it is a virus and that is a virus for AIDS which is transmitted through sexually transmitted or through blood-to-blood contact or from one infected mother to the child if she breastfeed that baby. We live in an environment that is full of many creatures apart from us. It is inevitable that many diseases will be transmitted by other animals. These animals carry the infecting agents from a sick person to another potential host. These animals are thus the intermediaries and are called vectors. So there are such animals which transmits the virus from one person to another, and such animals are called vectors. Here in the chart you can see how the disease is transmitted from infected person to a healthy person. It may be in a direct contact with the healthy person or by air, that is the sneezing, coughing, the droplets get infected to the healthy person. Indirect contact means the clothes you use or the vessels you use, or by food, mosquitoes and bed bugs and dogs, all those are vectors of transmitting disease. The commonest vector we all know are mosquitoes. In many species of mosquitoes, the female need highly nutritious food in the form of blood in order to be able to lay mature eggs. Mosquitoes feed on many warm-blooded animals including us. In this way, they can transfer disease from one person to another. Organ-specific and tissue-specific manifestation. The disease causing microbe enter the body through these different means. Where do they go then? The body is a very large when compared to the microbes. So there are many possible spaces, organs or tissues where they could go. Do all microbes go to the same tissue or the organ, or do they go to the different one? Different species of microbes seem to have evolved to home in on different parts of the body. In part, this selection is connected to their point of entry. If they enter from the air via the nose, they are likely going to the lungs. This is seen in the bacteria causing tuberculosis. If they enter through mouth, they can stay in the gut lining like typhoid causing bacteria, or go to the liver like the virus that caused jaundice. But this needn't always be the case. An infection like HIV that comes from body via sexual organs will spread to lymph nodes all over the body. Malaria causing microbes enter through mosquito bites, will go to liver and then go to red blood cells. The virus causing Japanese encephalitis or brain fever will similarly enter through mosquito bite, but it goes on to infect the brain. So, according to the given paragraph, there are specific regions where the microbes enter. If they enter through nose, that is through the air, it goes to lungs. If it enters through mouth, it goes to the gut region or the liver. But this doesn't mean the same in all the cases. Just like we have read in HIV, it enters through sexual organ, but it spreads all over the body. Malaria, mosquito bite, also enters through blood and it goes to liver and the red blood cells. Virus causing Japanese encephalitis or brain fever, it also enters through mosquito bite, that it enters blood and it goes to infect the brain. The sign and symptoms of the disease will thus depend on the tissue or organ which the microbe target. If the lungs are the target, then symptom will be cough and breathlessness. If the liver is the target, then there will be jaundice. If the brain is the target, we observe headache, vomiting, fit, unconsciousness, and so on. We can imagine what the symptom and sign of an infection will be if we know the target tissue or organ is and the function that are carries out by this tissue or organ. In addition to this tissue specific effect of infectious disease, there will be other common effects too. Most of this common effect depend on the fact that body immune system is activated in response to infection. An active immune system recruit many cells to affected tissue to kill the disease causing microbes. This recruitment process is called inflammation. So dear students, as soon as your body gets infected, it starts reacting, and one of the symptom of reaction would be inflammation, that is the happening of fever. As a part of this process, there are local effects such as swelling and pain, and general effects such as fever. In some cases, the tissue specificity of the infections lead to very general seeming effect. For example, in HIV infection, virus goes to the immune system and damages the function. That means the strength to fight against the pathogenic bacteria loosens or becomes weak. Thus, many of the effects of HIV/AIDS are because of the body can no longer fight off the many minor infections that we face every day. Instead, every small cold can become pneumonia. Similarly, a minor gut infection can produce major diarrhea with blood loss. Ultimately, it is these infections that kill people suffering from HIV/AIDS. So, in HIV/AIDS, the first symptom is the immunity that becomes weak. As soon as the immunity becomes weak, you no longer can fight against the common diseases that are around you. And soon your body weakens, it gets continuously infected by many diseases, and slowly and steadily the body dies. It is also important to remember that the severity of disease manifestation depend on the number of microbes in the body. If the number of microbes is very small, the disease manifestation may be minor or unnoticed. But if the number of the same microbe large, the disease can be severe enough to be life-threatening. The immune system is a major factor that determines the number of microbes surviving in the body. Principles of treatment. What are the steps taken by your family when you fall sick? Have you ever thought why you sometimes feel better if you sleep for some time? When does the treatment involve medicine? Based on what we have learned so far, it would appear that there are two ways to treat an infectious disease. One would be to reduce the effect of the disease, and the other to kill the cause of the disease. For the first, we can provide treatment that will reduce the symptom. The symptoms are usually inflammation. For example, we can take medicine that can bring down fever, reduce pain or lose motion. We can take bed rest so that we can conserve our energy. This will enable us to have more of it available to focus on healing. So why do doctors say that you should rest? Because when you rest, your body focuses more on healing. It recovers quickly. But this kind of symptom directed treatment by itself will not make the infecting microbe go away, and the disease will not be cured. For that, we need to be able to kill off the microbes. How do we kill the microbe? One way is to use medicine that kills microbe. We have seen earlier that microbes can be classified into different categories: virus, bacteria, fungi or protozoa. Each of these groups of organisms will have some essential biochemical life process which is peculiar to that group and not shared with other groups. These processes may be pathway for the synthesis of new substance or respiration. The pathway will not be used by us either. For example, our cells may make new substance by mechanism different from that used by bacteria. We have to find a drug that blocks the bacterial synthesis pathway without affecting our own. This is what is achieved by the antibiotics that we are familiar with. Similarly, there are drugs that kill protozoa such as malarial parasite. One reason why making antiviral medicine is harder than making antibacterial medicine is that viruses have few biochemical mechanisms of their own. That means viruses are dangerous than bacteria, just like COVID-19 cases. They enter our cell and use our machinery for their life process. This means that there are relatively few virus-specific targets to aim at. Despite this limitation, there are now effective antiviral drugs. For example, the drug keep HIV infection under control. So dear students, as you have read in this section that bacteria and viruses can be treated in different ways. Bacteria can be treated like blocking their pathway so that it doesn't reach our cell. But for virus, it is a little typical. Viruses don't take pathways. They directly enter our cells and then they become active. So, if we want to kill the virus, then we have to enter the cell, and that is a little tricky. Principles of prevention. All of what we have talked about so far deals with how to get rid of an infection in someone who has the disease. But there are three limitations of this approach to dealing with infectious disease. The first is that once someone has disease, their body function are damaged and may never recover completely. The second is that treatment will take time, which means that someone suffering from the disease is likely to be bedridden for some time, even if we can give proper treatment. The third is that the person suffering from an infectious disease can serve as a source from where the infection may spread to the other people. This leads to the multiplication of the above difficulty. It is because of such reasons that prevention disease is better than their cure. How can we prevent disease? There are two ways, one general, one specific to each disease. The general ways of preventing infections most relate to preventing exposure, just like the present situation of COVID-19. You wear mask, you sanitize yourself, you wash your hands, and that is a general way of preventing infection. But what if you are infected? How can we prevent exposure to infectious microbe? If we look at the means of their spreading, we can get some easy answer. For airborne microbe, we can prevent exposure by providing living conditions that are not overcrowded. For waterborne microbe, we can prevent exposure by providing safe drinking water. This can be done by treating the water to kill any microbial contamination. For vector-borne infection, that is the mosquitoes, we can provide clean environment so that no breeding of mosquitoes is done. Less mosquitoes or no mosquitoes leads to zero value in malaria in fact. This would not, for example, allow mosquito breeding. In other words, public hygiene is one basic key to the prevention of infectious disease. So, the general way of preventing infectious disease and the main part of preventing infectious disease is public hygiene. In addition to this issue that relate to the environment, there are some other general principles to prevent infectious disease. To appreciate those principles, let us ask a question we have not looked so far. Normally, we are faced with many with infections every day. If someone is suffering from cold and cough in the class, it is likely that the children sitting around will be exposed to the infection. But all of them do not actually suffer from disease. Why not? This is because the immune system of our body is normally fighting off microbe. We have cells that specialize in killing infecting microbes. These cells go in action each time infecting microbes enter the body. If they are successful, we do not actually come down with any disease. The immune cell manages to kill off the infection long before it assumes major proportion. As we noted earlier, if the number of infecting microbe is controlled, the manifestation of disease will be minor. In other words, becoming exposed or to infect with an infectious microbe does not necessarily mean developing noticeable disease. So one way of looking at severe infection disease is that it represents a lack of success of the immune system. The functioning of the immune system, like any other system in our body, will not be good if proper and sufficient nourishment and food is not available. Therefore, the second basic principle of prevention of infectious disease is the availability of proper and sufficient food for everyone. Which was the first one? It was public hygiene. The second, availability of proper and sufficient food for everyone. These are general ways of preventing infection. What are the specific ways? So, which are the two general ways of preventing infection? Public hygiene and nourished food. They relate to peculiar property of the immune system that usually fight off microbial infection. Let us cite an example to try and understand this property. These days, there is no smallpox anywhere in the world. But as recently as 100 years ago, smallpox epidemics were not at all uncommon. In such an epidemic, people used to be very afraid of coming near someone suffering from the disease since they were afraid of catching the disease. However, there was one group of people who did not have this fear. These people would provide nursing care for the victims of the smallpox. These were the group of people who had smallpox earlier and survived it. Although with lot of scarring, in other words, if you had smallpox once, there is no chance of suffering from it again. So having the disease once was a means of preventing subsequent attack of the same disease. Why does this happen? This happens because when the immune system first sees an infectious microbe, it responds against it and then remembers it specifically. So the next time that particular microbe or its close relative enter the body, the immune system respond with even greater vigor. This eliminates the infection even more quickly than the first time around. This is the basis of the principle of immunization. You can see here Edward Jenner, he realized that the milkmaid who had cowpox did not catch smallpox, and cowpox was a mild disease. So what he tried, he deliberately gave cowpox to people and found that they were now resistant to smallpox. This was because the smallpox virus is closely related to cowpox virus. We can now see that as a general principle, we can fool the immune system into developing the memory for a particular infection by putting something that mimics the microbe we want to vaccine against into the body. This does not actually cause the disease, but this would prevent any subsequent exposure to the infecting microbe from turning into actual disease. So, the way of fighting with virus is immunization or vaccination. We normally input microbes, dead microbes into our body. That white blood cells identifies as germs and kill at the same moment. After that, it keeps a memory of such microbes. Whenever a close cousin or such microbes enter our body, the white blood cells kill such things. Many such vaccines are now available for preventing a whole range of infectious disease and provide a disease-specific means of prevention. There are vaccines against tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, polio, and many others. These form the public health program of childhood immunization for preventing infectious disease. So during your early childhood, you were in fact injected with many of the microbes which caused tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, polio, and many others like that. But now you are all safe because your white blood cells knows this type of disease. So if ever you come across your cells come across this type of things, it directly starts killing them. These form the public health program of childhood immunization for preventing the infectious disease. Of course, such program can be useful only if such health measures are available to all children. Some hepatitis virus which cause jaundice are transmitted through water. There is a vaccine for one of them, hepatitis A, in the market. But the majority of children in many parts of India are already immune to hepatitis A by the time they are 5 years old. This is because they are exposed to virus through water. Under these circumstances, would you take the vaccine? So dear students, we have come to the end of the chapter. So kindly read the chapter. Thank you.